of you new to Cribs It Goes Blue, I'm Janet Singer, one of CGB's co-founders and the political director, a nurse midwife, and a lifelong election junkie. CGB, powered largely by a community of Harvard alumni volunteers, works to elect Democrats, protect the freedom to vote and the integrity of our elections, and fight authoritarianism. Now 3,000 members strong, we organize our community to make strategic use of your time, your funds, and your influence, and we do it with a mixture of hope and urgency. I know you're here to be part of this community and to do something for our democracy. Whether you want to become an activist or deepen your existing work, CGB is your home. This may be our most well-attended event yet, and we are going to try to do a lot of things tonight. I will discuss the political landscape, why Democrats are poised for a strong year, and why midterm wins are the ultimate bulwark against the current regime's authoritarianism. And I will talk about how you can participate. Afterwards, we'll have Q&A sessions with two amazing guests, Joe Biden's 2020 chief pollster, John Anzalone, and Sara, Ghazal, an expert on election subversion, who is the lead architect of the Democratic Attorneys General Association, DAGA's, work to support AGs in states where Trump is scheming to subvert elections. Thanks to all of you who submitted questions ahead of time. Finally, we will close the night with a performance by one of our beloved former interns, Henry Pahlow. We are all devastated by the threats to our democracy, and we are all inspired by the resistance exemplified by the brave citizens of Minneapolis. And we are thrilled by the announcement this morning that the surge operation there will conclude. In generations to come, when the question is asked, where were you when they came for immigrants and tried to dismantle the very foundations of our democracy, we will be able to say we stood up, worked to keep the wheels of democracy turning, and see that people could vote and have their votes counted, and that we did everything we could to elect candidates who could change the balance of power and return the power to those who believe in freedom and justice for all. This week, I thought a lot about Bad Bunny performing at the Super Bowl. Making an explicit call for unity on the country's biggest stage. The NFL is in the business of entertainment, not radical politics. While the news cycle loves to highlight hate, the most watched broadcast of this year acts as a mirror, reflecting a cultural moment, one that suggests American identity is rooted more in love than in division. So where are we starting in this election year? The country is much bluer today than it was in November of 2024. The strongest predictor of midterm success is being the party out of power, and Americans are ready for change. In the House, we only need to net 3 seats to take back the majority. In the Senate, we now have a plausible, if difficult, path to a majority, though it requires winning in some pretty red territory. Democrats currently lead the generic ballot by about 5 points, an 8-point swing from 2024. A recent Fox poll shows Democratic support at 52%, the highest ever recorded, the previous high being before the giant blue wave of 2018. Poor presidential approval ratings are correlated with losing elections. Trump's net approval rating is deeply underwater at minus 15 points. The intensity of this opposition is not likely to fade, with fully half of the country saying they strongly disapprove of his job performance. He is underwater by 30 points with women, 82 with Blacks, 40 with Hispanics, and 20 with independents. 27, sorry. Notably, he is at minus 10 with non-college educated voters, the very group that fueled his rise. In 2025, Democrats overperformed by an average of 13 points in special elections. We won because of the political climate, but also because we had the right candidates in the right places at the right time. candidates who were perceived as genuine and fighting for the people. We found our footing by focusing on affordability, healthcare, and corruption. While views of the Democratic Party remain low, we hold a sizable enthusiasm advantage. Our voters are simply more motivated to show up. On the redistricting front, Democrats have successfully neutralized the Republican gerrymanders. Now, how do you fit in? The elections will happen. We must go full force in competitive districts. Winning back the House by the largest possible margins is one of the best ways to guard against potential attempts to overturn elections. We must fight their election subversion leading up to the election, and we must be fully prepared after the election to enforce the results. It is a time for vigilance and practical solutions, not fear. CGB will provide you with high-impact, evidence-based opportunities to donate and volunteer, whether you have a little time or a lot, whether you live in a red state or a blue state. I want to walk you through our website, cribsitgoesblue.org, so you will know where to find things. When you go to our homepage, you'll see that we have a calendar. And when you go to the calendar, you'll see the events that we're having, including team meetings and protests and nights like tonight. You can also go to our strategy page where you'll learn all about what races we're targeting. But I want to show you that you can join one of our teams. So if you click on the Join an Action team and scroll down, you'll see that we have state-based teams. If you hover over one of them, like Michigan, you'll see who the leaders are. You'll see how to email the team. And if you click on the detail about targeted races in Michigan, you'll see all the races that we're working on. So these are the competitive races. When they have a big question mark, it's because they're still primaries and we don't know the candidate, but when we know the candidate, you'll see them. And Michigan, for example, has 3 competitive House races. When you scroll all the way down, you can go back and look at our whole target state, and you can pick any state and learn about them and what we're working on. I want to take you back to the action teams. So in addition to our state teams, oh, there's Georgia. In addition to our state teams, we also have program teams. You'll see our voter protection team, our phone banking team. We're going to be doing a phone bank to Virginia probably starting next week because Virginia, with any luck, is going to have new maps and the voters need to vote on that. But it's a special election. Very few know about it, and we're going to do a lot of voter education. Our voter protection team is our biggest team. And our protest team is our newest team. When we knew we had to fight authoritarianism, we needed to start protesting. So we've organized a team, and we are especially looking at March 28th, the next No Kings March, to get as many CGB people in as many places protesting as we can. And finally, I want to show you about our donation page. So that's the target maps. If you go to any page and you click donate, you can learn about our Cribs It Goes Blue portfolio. The portfolio is our tool to help you give smartly. We know that all of you are getting more texts than you can handle. You don't know who should you give to and who shouldn't you give to. We know about half of Democratic money is wasted on candidates who are either going to win no matter how much money we give them, or going to lose no matter how much money we give them. So we choose the candidates who are underfunded in the most competitive races where they can affect the balance of power. When you click on an amount that you want to donate, you will see the candidates we are currently supporting and how we divvy up the donations. You'll also see that we recommend giving to a bunch of grassroots groups that mobilize voters and register voters. And in addition, we always have a group now that is working on making our elections free and fair, and that might be a legal group or another group. Right now, we're supporting Democracy Defenders Action. So that is the quick tour of our website. There's a lot there. I know it's a lot of information, so I hope you will spend some time on our website, that you will check out our brand new private Substack, and you will read our newsletters so you can stay informed and connected. Because doing this work as part of this community is what makes it special and fun. And we will send a follow-up letter with the links to all these different opportunities that we have. 2026 is the year we will raise money together, phone bank together, canvass together, and protest in the streets together. And we will be the visible opposition to the authoritarian overreach, using our collective talent and resources. And now I'm going to turn it over to one of our interns, Carter Umphress.
Thank you, Janet. Hello, everybody. My name is Carter Umphress, and I am a sophomore at the college, originally from Nevada, and I'm currently an intern here at Crimson Goes Blue. Sorry, just switching tabs there. So tonight's guest, John Anzalone, is one of the nation's leading pollsters and messaging strategists. He served as chief pollster for Joe Biden's 2020 presidential campaign, helping shape the messaging and strategy behind major communications, policy rollouts, and convention themes. He also polled for President Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, and for Secretary Hillary Clinton in 2016, and has helped elect dozens of U.S. senators, governors, and members of Congress. In 2026, John will lead the strategic team for Roy Cooper's U.S. Senate campaign in North Carolina. John also co-founded the Wall Street Journal poll with GOP pollster Tony Fabrizio, now one of the nation's premier national and battleground polls. More close to home to us, John was a resident fellow at Harvard's Institute of Politics in the fall of 2024, where he led a weekly study group on polling and political strategy. I had the privilege of serving as one of his student liaisons, and I'm proud to call him a mentor and friend. He is also a current member of the Hauser Leaders Program at Harvard Kennedy School. Tonight, John will be interviewed by CGB's board chair, Monty Bruell. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Carter. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Carter. And John, thanks so much for joining us this evening. I want to warn you, most of what I know about polling, I've loved watching The West Wing. So, you can take that with a grain of salt. So when I think back to college, I can't think of a single person who said, I want to be a pollster after graduation. So how did you find yourself on this particular career path, and what's the ride been like? I mean, what's happened from then until now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to thank everyone who's part of this organization. It's really important what you're doing. I'll talk a little bit about some of the money disadvantages that Democrats have, but thank you for what you're doing here to help Democrats get elected. Also, Sarah's going to be talking later. Thanks for what you do in Georgia, which is so important after we've literally had part of the DOJ and Tulsi Gabbard there last week. Listen, I was a campaign operative, and one of the things I always tell the students when I'm at Harvard or any university is you just got to get involved. You got to go and do a campaign. You're a former candidate, right, Monty? I mean, the fact is that you got to go do a state leg race or a mayor's race or whatever race there is to understand kind of the foundation of how campaigns work. And my first boss out of college was this young U.S. senator from Delaware named Joe Biden, who was running for president in 1987. I was the first guy in Iowa for him, just as a lowly organizer. I went on from there to manage a congressional race, then a U.S. Senate race in 1988 with James Carville in New Jersey. Did a big city mayor's race, did a governor's race, and then eventually got off the campaign trail and a kind of apprenticed at a polling firm, and then started my own polling firm. And it's like it's like every other business in America. It's like you grind it out, you're kind of a bottom feeder, and you work hard. And you got some talents, but you got to go out there. And I started winning really hard races, special elections in the South. Got some notice of David Axelrod, David Plouffe, and that group. And my big break came in 2008 when they asked me to do Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida, the southern states that no one was going to, Barack Obama wasn't going to win because no one had won those in a long time. And we were really proud to be part of that team. They were able to see some of the stuff that we were able to do. So we had a bigger role in 2012. Polling changed in 2016. I mean, the world changed with Donald Trump, but polling also changed with Donald Trump. And so it was a great ride. I mean, I started my own firm in 1994, the first time since 1956 that Republicans took back the House, right? So, you go through good times and bad times. I was there with Rahm Emanuel when he was running the DCCC in 2006, when Nancy Pelosi was taking back the gavel. We had some really good, tough races. Was there when we lost it in 10, was there when we brought it back in 18, and was there when we, lost it again. So, it's always a crazy ride. But, each step, there's really people that you are proud to be part of their team. Roy Cooper in North Carolina when he was governor, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, which is my home state, John Bel Edwards, who no one ever thought was going to get elected in Louisiana, but whose very first stroke of the pen when on inauguration day was expanding Medicaid. Those are the type of things that really make you proud, and it's why we do this.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you're working for Roy Cooper now. I live in Southeast Tennessee. I
Yeah.
can stand on my front porch and throw a rock and practically hit both Georgia and North Carolina. I've looked at the last couple of election cycles, and it seems to me something funky has been going on in the rural areas in both Georgia and North Carolina. Particularly, I'm concerned with voter suppression of African American voters in rural counties. Uh, have you noticed anything like that in North Carolina, or is this just my imagination?
Well, it may be a better question for Sarah, but what we see is, listen, it's gotten post COVID. During 2020, it was really easy to vote, right? Because we made it easy to vote. It was a terrible time because of a pandemic, but the fact is that everyone has the ease of voting, whether it was mail-in ballots or you could go down the street and put your ballot in a box, right? There were, early voting and Saturdays and Sundays and things like that. And when the Republicans took over in a lot of these states, Georgia, really big changes, but also North Carolina, really big changes where they restricted the access to vote. I think that is bigger than that. I think that rural voters, Roy Cooper was a guy who beat an incumbent in 2016 while Trump was taking the state, won re-election in 2020 when Trump was taking the state. And we always had a rural strategy. He grew up in Nash County, which was a rural place. And you have to make the effort to go there, right? Like that is really important. You see Josh Shapiro, same thing. He's kind of a city urban guy, but he goes to every of the counties. There was a great New York Times story about how, he just shows up and he knows that these aren't necessarily his voters, but you have to show up. And I think that's really important. We were talking about, I kind of live in this panhandle of Florida. Most of it's rural. Gwen Graham beat an incumbent in 2014 in a race that she wasn't supposed to win, but she cut the margins in the rural areas. So you're not getting beat 70-30, you're only getting beat 60-40, or 65-35. And those 5 percentage points matter. I think we learned that with Hillary Clinton, who I love and adore dearly, but we stayed too much in the urban areas. And then what happened? Joe Biden wasn't just going to Pittsburgh, he was going to Beaver County and Erie and in Western PA. And so I think there's something to learn about that. You have to show up, and we can communicate. We can communicate and compete to a better level in rural America if we do that.
I think both Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff in Georgia surprised Republicans by showing up.
Yeah,
Uh, both of those senators go to every county that there is in Georgia, and I think they've made tremendous inroads.
absolutely, absolutely.
So speaking of inroads, polling has gotten to be very precise. Uh, Polls are done at a very granular, microscopic level. And I've seen talking heads on TV say, "Oh, well, if a candidate can just win these 10 counties, they're going to be the next president of the United States." So has this level of polling really helped our political process, or has it contributed
Yeah.
to the divisiveness and maybe even the apathy? Because maybe people say, you know what, they've already told me that if I don't live in these 10 counties,
Yeah.
my vote
Yeah.
doesn't count.
I think that and I want to also get to, I see in the chat there, I think it's Marjorie asked, how do we compete with disinformation from the right? I want to put these two things together to talk about showing up. For example, in 2020, American Bridge, which is a big super PAC, they picked 70 counties in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that Trump had won. And to go to disinformation, it's a little more than just disinformation. There's areas of the country where Democrats don't have a voice. They don't communicate. They don't show up. And what American Bridge did was they flooded these 70 counties with paid communications, with actual like newspapers and direct mail and TV and a field program and radio. They filled the void, right? All these voters ever heard was the Republican narrative. And so American Bridge, again, filled the void with paid communication. And what they did was they only moved the vote there between 5 and 10 percentage points in these counties. But guess what? In 2020, Joe Biden won by what, 47,000 votes in 3 states. So,
Right.
so it's not just disinformation. It's actually, we don't have a voice in so many places. And to get back to what you're talking about, Monty, it's less about polling than in 2017, analytics, big data was driving where Hillary was going or where communication was going. And it was, what can you get for an efficiency out of $1 of communication, of a field person, et cetera. And it restricted going out into those places where they didn't believe you could actually get voters. Well, what happens is you start losing those 80-20, 75-25, 70-30 instead of the 65-35s or the 60-40. And you got to do math. Like, elections are about math. It's about winning 50 plus 1. You can't give up on any demographic, right? You can't say, oh, African Americans are our base. Well, no, everyone's our base. Like, everyone's a persuadable voter when you have a divided nation or a divided state. I mean, the fact is that Warnock and Ossoff, when they've run the last 3 times, barely won. So you can't give up on any demographic. And I think that is the lesson of listening too much to big analytics. I don't think it's so much polling where we're really message development strategists. We're also targeters. But you can't be handcuffed to polling. You also have to make sure that you're talking to everyone.
Yeah.
Money is a big thing. Like, I don't know if you saw the New York Times article. I was going to put this in the chat. The fact is that right now, if you take a look at the chart in that article, right now, if you just take a look at the party committees and what the independent expenditures, Republicans have 2.5 to 1 what Democrats have. But if you add the Trump money, it's going to be like 10 or 12 to 1. And, we were talking earlier about the generic ballot, which Democrats would lead by 4 or 5 points. At this time in 2018, we were leading by 8 or 10. Okay. So we shouldn't think that this is 2018. We have a little wind at our back, but the fact is that with this type of money advantage for Republicans, and the fact that Democrats are at a historic low in their image. Like, I do a lot of focus groups. And the fact is that people have plenty of positive things to say about what they like about Donald Trump. He's strong. He's action. He closed the border. America is back. They have plenty of concerns too. They don't think he makes the economy the priority. They don't like his policies. They wish he would shut his mouth. They have nothing positive to say about the Democratic Party. So again, what you're doing here, crimson blue is really important because we also have to fill a void, not a void, but a gap on the donor side. Now, angry voters win, and our voters are angry. And so we have that going for us. We have wind at our back, but there's plenty of other things that we have going against us. And so I think in all of these big battleground states, it is going to be hand-to-hand combat.
So I've already said I live in Tennessee, and I know a lot of lifelong Republicans who don't want to have anything to do with Donald Trump. They will never, ever vote for Donald Trump again, but they can't bear calling themselves Democrats.
Yeah.
And so how do we reach that group? Because it's a big group. There are a lot of people out there like that.
Yeah, listen, I think that we're all opinion elites. Like, so people who we talk to are different, college educated, a little bit more informed. We might find soft Republicans. I've put together a list for a former CEO of like one of the largest companies in America who for the first time and his wife and him are going to give to Democrats. Those people are important, right? But when you look at real voters in our Washington Post poll, 90 something percent of self-identified Republicans are sticking with the Republican Party and Trump, right? I mean, that really is happening. And so, listen, it's about peeling off people. Right now, independents are moving towards us. They're very disaffected about Trump, but they're not in love with us. I think we have to realize real voters, it's a pox on both houses, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we're not really an alternative for them right now. We have to prove that we can be that way station and an alternative. I think that we're going to have a good election cycle. I think that the political environment will benefit us and probably give us the House. We have to run the table in the Senate. Like we have to take back Minnesota, Maine. We have to take back North Carolina. And we have to take back probably Alaska, which I think is our better next opportunity, and then either Ohio or Iowa. We have to run the table plus keep Michigan and Georgia in the Democratic side. So that's a big lift. Again, I don't think it's a 2018, but I think that organizations like you and donors like you need to fill the gap that we're seeing out there. And let's not forget, there's two Supreme Court cases that could really screw with everything. They could obliterate the Civil Rights Act, right? So the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
That's 12 to 14 African American districts. That won't mean anything this cycle, but it'll send signals that we could only have the House for 2 years. So again, more money for the Republicans, and then a campaign finance reform bill that looks like it might get shot down, which could just make, again, funding completely the Wild West, which will probably advantage the Republicans. So this is going to be a long cycle, and it's great to have the win at your back, but you got to earn it at the end of the day.
Yeah. So what have these special elections that we've seen this year really meant for Democrats? I mean, is there going to be this huge blue wave? And if so, how can an organization like Crimson Goes Blue
Yeah.
read the tea leaves and invest money where it's going to make a difference?
So I think that the special elections are really important because it does show you what I believe, which is really important. Angry voters win. Democratic voters are angry, right? And that is really important. And so we're more motivated to get out than Republicans right now. We have a motivation question that we ask in polling, and from 1 to 10, how enthusiastic or how motivated you are. Democrats have about an 18-point advantage right now. Now, we got to see how that is post-September, right? Post-Labor Day, rather. But the fact is that that's really good for us. Again, we have an image problem, which means we have to get our message right. And at the end of the day, this is going to be about making Trump and the Republicans own their economy, and they're going to try to make us, the social woke people on transgenders and illegals and criminals. We know the playbook, and I think, do better at recruiting candidates in a lot of ways than Republicans. But the motivation is a big part of this. And if we can reinforce that again with good candidates, with recruiting, with good donor dollars, and with good organization on the ground when we need it at the end, that's going to make a difference.
John, I will get you out of here on this final question. You mentioned that Democrats have an image problem. I think, Democrats, like I guess all politicians, have a trust problem too. Um, you mentioned that your average voter says a pox on both their houses when looking at Democrats and Republicans. How do Democrats break through this trust issue? Because that that
Yeah.
that seems to me, what the real issue is.
Yeah, I think it's authenticity, number one. And I think that right now voters do not believe that Democrats listen to them. We should be the party of the working families, the party of, the little guy, all that type of stuff, and the working woman. And they don't feel like we're listening. And so, take a look at what happened with Abigail Spanberger, Mickey Sherrill, both moderates in the moderate caucus of our party, right? We have to, nominate candidates who can win and who can resonate with swing voters. And that doesn't mean giving up, your passion or, what you believe in. But you got to listen to what voters want. I mean, the fact is that when I do focus groups, I hear about people's grocery prices, right? I hear about, them struggling to, when I do younger voters, they say I'll never be able to buy a house. When I do older voters, they say my kids will never buy a house. So we have to talk about what are the components of American Dream and reconnect on those. And those also include values, right? I mean, those are values laden things. And we can't be afraid to talk about values. And we can't, quite frankly, discard why someone like Trump is appealing, right? In terms of some of the things that he says, not the terrible, awful, shitty things, but the value laden thing that, quite frankly, the Democratic Party used to talk about as well when I was growing up in it. So, we can't have blinders on about what is important to people. And I think that that is important too. Start listening to what voters are saying to you and make sure that those things that they say to you are the priority of what you're talking about as well.
Great. John, this has been fabulous, and thanks so much for joining us, and I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for what you're doing. And I hope we can do it again.
Well, thank you, John, and welcome, and thank you all for coming. It's really wonderful and heartening with just 9 months to the midterms to see this growing crowd. Excuse me. My name is Lisa Ulrich, and I'm the managing director of Crimson Goes Blue. And tonight I'm here to talk or begin a conversation about election subversion. As Janet mentioned, we're optimistic about the midterms, but we are also clearly concerned that if the Republicans lose, well, the President Trump has no incentive to allow the Republicans to lose, and that he is very likely to challenge or delegitimize those results. And as we all know, every single week brings some new threat, including most recently a declaration that Trump is asking to nationalize the elections, which experts say is really a code for ensuring that Republicans have control over key decisions in key districts. So since our founding, Crimson Goes Blue has focused on voter protection, mobilizing volunteers to combat suppression and help ensure that ballots are cast and counted. But this year, we've asked a broader question. Beyond access to the ballot, what systemic threats, especially those driven at the federal level, could emerge in 2026, and how can they be prevented? Through our Innovation Lab, we convened the newly named Strategic Task Force for Election Protection and consulted leading election law and election management experts. And their conclusions were clear. The greatest risk to our elections are not cancellation, but post-election subversion. So tonight, we are honored to speak with Sara, Tindall, Ghazal about what that could look like. What threats are most likely, what protections are already in place, and what we can do as citizens and as members of Crimson Goes Blue. Sara is a hero. She has devoted her career to protecting elections, working internationally in Liberia, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, to name a few, often alongside President Jimmy Carter through the Carter Center. And then here at home, where she returned after seeing similar subversion threats emerge. A graduate of Emory Law School, Sara ran for Congress in Georgia in 2020. She serves as the only Democratic member of the Georgia Election Commission, and she is the chief architect of the Democratic Attorneys General Association's effort to prepare AGs in key states to defend election integrity. Because attorneys general play such a critical legal role, the class of 78 has taken a leadership is taken leadership, and they are raising a $75,000 fund to support a live 2026 midterm scenario for Democratic AGs and their staff to practice and predict and prevent election subversion. So welcome, Sara. We are so happy to have you. And we'd like to start kind of a la the fact that we have some academic background, to ask you to give us the 1-minute civics lesson about elections and how they're supposed to be run. Like, what is that role for the federal government and the states? And can Trump actually cancel elections?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everyone, for having me join you this evening. And in 1 minute, the Constitution makes it very clear. There is a clause in Article 1 of the Constitution: states run elections, not the executive branch, not Congress. Congress can pass laws that impact elections, but they're run by states. And in reality, in most places, it's actually counties and small jurisdictions that operate elections, and that dispersion is one of the best protections that we have. Trump cannot cancel elections, no.
So among the panoply of threats, what's keeping you up at night? What do you consider the greatest and most likely? And are there places you're most worried about? And how do you even know what's going to matter the most, given that, every day with Trump is a new adventure?
That's quite a way of phrasing it. Living in Fulton County and being on the Georgia State Election Board, yes, I have had many sleepless nights in the past several weeks. And look, Trump has made it clear. Yeah, he is going to continue to weaponize the government, the federal government, to try to disrupt the elections, primarily in Democratic states, but also in Democratic cities. We've seen it here. He fears voters, and he fears free and fair elections. He's already tried and failed a number of efforts to take control. He has passed an executive order, which has been blocked in the courts, primarily by Democratic AGs. He's seized ballots here at election materials from 2020 in Fulton County, and that is in part an effort to take over. Literally, there's a provision in Georgia state law that allows the state election board to take over elections in Fulton County, and that would have a devastating impact on our statewide elections, including our Senate election. But there are ways of blocking that in court, and I intend to support that. He'll continue to weaponize federal law enforcement and federal immigration enforcement and try to intimidate election officials, intimidate voters. But again, we're fighting him in court. We're blocking him in court. But we're also going to need to fight in the media and fight among voters and remind voters that they have the power to stop this by doing exactly what he fears most, which is going out and voting.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we are interested, and you've started to mention this, about what guardrails are in place to protect free and fair elections, and kind of like what's happening behind the scenes in the legal world, but perhaps in other places and in other institutions that are, we hope, that could help to prevent subversion.
Right. Well, like I said, in court, we've been winning. The AGs have taken him to court to block the implementation of the executive order that would have really upended the way elections are run. Right now, the Department of Justice has sued every single Democratic state plus Georgia to try to access their voter rolls. In the 3 cases that have reached a conclusion, all 3 courts, including a Trump-appointed judge, have ruled the DOJ doesn't have the right to do this. There are other groups out there that are working hand in glove, and in parallel, we're all rowing in the same direction. Groups like the Campaign Legal Center, groups like the state democracy defenders, state democratic parties, with voter protection efforts. We're all doing the same thing. Campaigns themselves, especially now, there's a brand new Supreme Court ruling that gives candidates standing, meaning that they have the right to challenge election processes in court. So they have the right to challenge anything that the federal government's trying to do. And even the Supreme Court even recognized California's redistricting effort, and that was not a sure thing. Lots and lots of attorneys were very concerned that they were going to block California, but they didn't. So we're operating on all cylinders right now, trying to make sure that there is a concerted, unified, all hands on deck effort.
Great. And just for the audience, we are going to talk about what happens if Trump pulls the Trump card and, brings the paramilitaries to the election. But that's in a moment. So we discovered that the attorneys general have a very critical role to play in preventing subversion. And I'd love for you to tell our gathering today about what role they play, but most importantly, what is this really creative election subversion scenario work that you're doing to get people ready, and why do you believe it's going to work?
Sure. I'm really excited to talk about that because state attorneys general are the chief law enforcement officers in each state. And what that means is they are the ones on the front line of every legal fight. They represent the state, they represent every agency in the state. So they are the ones who are suing the administration when the administration overreaches. They're the lawyers defending the state when they're being sued by the federal government. They defend state practices. And they're the ones who will be defending election results if election results are challenged after the fact, like what we saw in 2020. They can issue legal guidance to other state agencies, including law enforcement, about the proper role of armed law enforcement and what they can, what they can't do, and legal guidance to election officials and to voters alike. So what we're doing to make sure that the AGs are fully prepared, we have a working group that meets every single month. We bring in experts and we review different aspects of what we expect to be seeing. Ironically, the last meeting I conducted in my car on my phone when I was sitting in the parking lot in the Fulton County Election Hub, observing the FBI seizing 2020 election materials. And we were talking about the legal mechanisms for federal intervention that would more than likely include foreign intervention with Tulsi Gabbard and in the building next door. But that is one piece. But really, the key to how we work and the most effective way is we conduct what are essentially war games. And so the election simulations in person, where we bring the AGs and their key line attorneys who work on elections together in a room. And in May, we're also bringing in secretaries of state and their key staff people. And we are going to run the traps. We are going to simulate as many different scenarios of federal election intervention that we can come up with, working with attorneys, working with former DOJ officials, so that not only will this allow these key decision makers to think on their feet, come up with creative solutions, but also identifies gaps in our planning, gaps in a legal analysis, gaps in perhaps actual legislation, in time to fill them. So we can do the research, we can have the memos, we can prepare the briefs, and sometimes even get loopholes in the laws, either issue guidance about that or try to even work with legislatures and get that changed in time so that we're prepared for everything.
I will lead the witness in saying that you told us that in 2024, every single scenario that was identified came true, but the great news was that you were already prepared.
Exactly. I mean, we talked about, we talked about bomb threats. We had bomb threats. We talked about burning ballots. We had burning ballots. We talked about challenges, legal challenges that we saw in North Carolina. It took 6 months to resolve that one, but we had walked through all of these scenarios. And the only ones that we didn't actually see were rejecting the results, because that was really on the voters and the voting results. So we're prepared for all of that already. And this new element that nobody has really faced before is a weaponized federal government. And that's why it's so important to do this again at an even higher level with an even greater sense of urgency.
So let's talk about the voters. Like, what would you recommend to voters to protect their vote? And I guess in particular, voters who are the most scared, if they're immigrants or if they're living in a place that's been overwhelmed by ICE, or like, how are they going to get their vote to count?
Well, the most important thing people need to do to protect their vote is to stay on top of their voter registration, because that is one of the most vulnerable areas, and this is where the DOJ is trying to meddle. Every voter needs to make sure that they're registered to vote, to stay on top of that, make sure that it is current and it is accurate, and that it remains current and accurate up until they actually vote. You need to make a plan to vote, which means literally plot out. If I'm going to vote by absentee ballot, I'm going to order it on this day. I know where to get my application. I know where to return it, preferably in person. Do it as quickly as possible. If I'm going to vote in person, where am I going to go? Who am I going to go with? Plan it all out in advance. And what we can do as people of privilege is, if it comes to this, if there are ICE agents in the area terrorizing communities, then we have to follow the lead of the heroes that we have seen in Minnesota and that we've seen in Portland and in Chicago and in North Carolina. And we need to literally stand as witnesses and stand to make sure that our neighbors who have the right to vote, who are citizens, can go and cast their ballot safely, free of fear, and free of favor.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the front lines and dedicating your life to this. And the elections in the past, we've talked about being voter coaches, but I think obviously the stakes are much higher. And this call to literally be witness and protection is going to have to be part of our strategy. And so I do want to let everyone here know that we're going to kind of continue to fundraise for you, follow this story, and keep everybody informed through our newsletter and Substack. And encourage you, if this interests you as a focal point of your work, to join the voter protection team, which is one of our most robust teams and is focused on this strategy right now. But everybody, I think, can do their work in the key battleground states once the elections get closer. So Sara, thank you so much for your work. And now I am incredibly honored and really happy to introduce our closing act. Henry Pahlow was just a wonderful, wonderful intern at Crimson Goes Blue. And like so many of our interns, he is a total overachiever. He is also in charge of the voter mobilization for the Harvard Dems. And most recently, he was the star of Harvard, Gilbert, and Sullivan's Pirates of Penzance. I can tell you our family is fallen in love. So tonight, to close out the evening, I am thrilled to turn over the floor to Henry and to ask you, Henry, why did you choose this song?
Well, I chose the song Imagine because I feel like in these times where it's so easy to give in to the anger and the rage about what this administration is doing, we need to channel that into hope and thinking about a better world and a more peaceful world. And I think that's what this song embodies. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of men. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I am not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Thank you, Henry. I have such strong memories of hearing that song played over and over during our freshman year when John Lennon was shot. Let us all, makes me so emotional. Let us all imagine a future for our country where our democracy thrives, and let's work to make that happen. Thanks to all of our guest speakers. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight. And thank you for that Valentine, Henry. We'll stick around for a few minutes if you have questions about Crimson Ghost Blue. And we'll see you soon at the polls or in the streets protesting or at one of our team meetings. Thanks, everybody.